City Hall meeting for the City Council of Elledge, Iowa on Monday, October 7th, 2024 at 6 p.m. Roll call.
Blackwell.
Present.
Campbell.
Present.
Collins.
Present.
Dockery.
Present.
Ryan called in, he'll be a little late. Looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Dockery, second by Campbell to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay. The ayes have it. Number 3, old business. 3A, report on LeClaire Road corridor study. Nevada, can I call on you for that? And Zach?
Sure.
There's a lot here.
Yeah, so hopefully you received it, but yes, this is the report for the corridor study for the project we've been looking at the last few months, from LeClaire Road, from First Street east to Scott Park Road. So it's in here, you'll find kind of all the data for everything from we looked at, getting the traffic counts to the accident data, took a look at access management along the corridor, reached out to business owners to get their input, talked to Bi-State to determine the growth rate they want us to use for future growth projections, looked at the future developments we knew of in the area that would have direct access to LeClaire Road, such as Ivy Acres development and the new Wilco over here. So, so that's kind of everything, the meat that you'll find in here. From it, I guess I can just give you kind of a summary of the overall, what we kind of came up with, or what we saw, I guess. So moving on through the intersection, I guess the biggest ones that, that we identified that need improvements that aren't there existing are 4th Avenue, which currently that one meets traffic signal warrants, and it's 4th and LeClaire, and it's noted in there how council's approved the traffic signal of 4th Avenue. And then the southbound off-ramp of Highway 61 also already meets warrants for traffic signals. So that intersection, we would propose some type of future considerations for that one as well to address those traffic operations. The other intersections are improvements, but not necessarily, operational improvements. So then when you get to towards the end of the report, that's when we kind of get into more of like the project phasing of what we see as potential future projects for the corridor. The first phase we identify is the 4th Avenue and LeClaire Road area. So as that signal is already approved and there's already funding that's in the budget, so we see that as the first step, doing LeClaire and 4th Avenue. And then the next one is probably from 9th Avenue east to 16th is the next one we see. And that's really your biggest project along the corridor, mainly because of the condition of the pavement and the improvements to the southbound off-ramp there. And then also we know the intersection 9th probably needs some widening to get trucks around there to the north. So, and then also as you get to 14th and 16th, as they're starting to see more truck traffic as well, they could likely benefit from potentially some radius widening to get trucks in and out. In talking with like Wilco specifically, they said that the trucks, they haven't encountered that as a big issue yet, but they said that they can see it being an issue in the future as they get more trucks kind of coming in as they kind of get more up to speed. So, and then finally kind of the third phase would be from 16th east to Scott Park Road. That one doesn't necessarily mean it needs to go last, because just from a traffic standpoint, that area performs pretty adequately. Not really traffic issues. That's more of probably maintenance improvements that would be needed for the roadway, just to address some of the running and pavement conditions under there. So that's kind of the high level overview of the study. Also then in there, talks about some funding sources we could look at, mainly for the stretch from 9th Avenue to 16th, just with how big of a project. I think we have an estimate in there that's probably gonna be in the $4 to $5 million range for all that work that would have to take place. We'd have to identify funding sources for that. So that'd be working with Bi-State, working with the DOT, especially for the off-ramps. And then identifying what those funding sources could be and kind of planning those into the future. So, it's kind of high level what's in the report. If there's any questions or any other areas you want me to kind of touch on, I'd be happy to.
I was surprised that the traffic counts at North Ninth Avenue were greater than First Street and Leclerc Road.
Yeah, I was a little, and the off-ramp, the southbound off-ramp, I think was the highest intersection of volume, at least, so.
Well, I just looked at turning left or turning east, and the peak hours there was 26 in the morning, and
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think most of the traffic on that thing is turning and going west.
Yeah, correct, yeah.
I don't remember night peak, what that was off the top of my head, but I remember the morning one was 26 vehicles going to the east.
Yeah, I was a little surprised too that traffic's actually been pretty flat over the last decade as far as like growth and whatnot. It hasn't really seen as big of an increase as I guess I probably would have anticipated, so.
How far down the ramps is Iowa DOT responsible for till it gets to the bottom where it starts to radius? Is that where it is, or how many feet back from like the stopping painted stripe?
So maintenance wise, I think that's all the city, like once you get past the ramp, but they did, because we have reached out and talked to them. There is the potential of, some funding that they would cover a portion of that ramp work. So the actual like intersection improvements, like if we go with a signal there or whatnot in the future, they probably wouldn't cover.
Sure.
But some of the pavement work, they would. They did say that their budgets for ramp work is pretty small, so, but there are other funding that we could, since that those could be considered part of the primary roadway, which 61 is, obviously. There's extra funding opportunities that potentially for some of that ramp work we could look at.
Thank you.
The state just paid for the one at the Long Grove and the one on 210th Street. The ramps.
Yeah, we asked them about that, like if they had plans to keep coming like this way, and they said they don't. I think they said that was a pilot project of some, that they were doing for those ones, so. Yeah, they don't have it, I guess, in their immediate plans to do anything with either Blackhawk Trail or Leclerc Road.
We did ask them to come out and do a review again, especially because the bike path and some of that retaining wall needs to be looked at, and we'd like to coordinate that with it too. And they did say they'd come out and review, but that was quite a while ago and we haven't seen them yet. So they'll be out eventually, but we're not in their current 6 years out budgeted for projects, I think, 5 or 6.
I know Bi-State, so when I talked to them, that all their allocated funds are allocated already through 2027 and partially through 2028. So they said they'll be reaching out in the spring to get kind of a list of projects for planning their next kind of batch, which Leclerc Road is already on their long-range plan, which is good because in order to get funding through the MPO, we gotta be on their long-range plan first. So both Leclerc Road from 9th to 16th is a project that's already on their long-range plan. And then also they have in there from 16th to Scott Park Road as like a reconstruction it's listed on their long-range plan. Doesn't mean that funding is allocated for either of those, but that's the first step is getting on their long-range plan. So.
But if we can get it on the list, then they can amend their program to advance it forwards.
Yeah, that'll be the next step, probably continuous talks with Bi-State to try to get one of these projects kind of on their list for future funding.
Zach,
Yeah.
I'm not for sure when I view this, if I overlooked the concept or those specifics, but from Ninth out to Scout Park Ward, was that going to be a gutter? Was that going to be, my understanding, is it going to put a
Just-
gutter
so,
in
I think
in a
looking
center
out-
turn lane or no?
I think looking out to just 16th Avenue, I think that we would want to look at going to an urban section. So from 9th Street where the curb and gutter kind of stops,
Right,
let's try and go curb and gutter to 16th.
216 and
So then
stop
they
it.
would probably end there and
Okay.
not go out to Scott Park
And then
Road.
it wouldn't, no.
I think you would keep your ditch and your section that you have there.
Right there. Would that constitute middle turn lanes though, between 16th and Scott Park Road?
No, not right now. Right now, the road, it performs pretty well from a traffic standpoint. Once you get east of 16th, like it doesn't really have the need for a center turn lane. I mean, that is a scenario if we do get some development that comes out into some of those areas, because I believe it's zoned industrial, I think, out there.
There's a commercial strip, right on the, right south of Eau Claire Road, future use commercial, to Scott Park Road, and then south of that, industrial.
So as it stands right now, it doesn't really have the need for a center turn lane, but if it continues to develop, if it develops out that way, then it's a possibility.
I didn't know what your figures and looking at by state and what they had interpreted out there or what numbers there were going to be. I know on the south side, it's still relative farm field. North side's developed. North Scott District has the bus barn down there too.
Yep.
And I hope that was all looked in the factoring about possibly putting in a center turn lane throughout there.
Yeah, I mean, all we can look at for this is the future developments we know about, and then we use the growth rate which Bi-State gave us 0.5%, which is pretty modest but that's it's a pretty well-developed area, so, yeah, if we find out a big, industrial development or something that's coming in, then that might change the plans east of 16. That's definitely a possibility in the future.
Well, there's gonna be a development just east of 18th Street, 18th Avenue. I don't know what kind of traffic it's gonna generate. You know what I'm referring to?
Off the top of my head.
Next, yeah,
They went out-
expansion.
Yeah, they went out and bored the subsurface.
Oh, gotcha.
I don't know what kind of traffic it's gonna generate.
What would be the timeline for, the public open house?
Oh, yeah, so that's kind of the next step that we haven't done yet would be, we still are planning on do a public open house that kind of just will present these findings and then get any other public comments. We had individual business owner meetings, now this would be kind of anyone from the public that wants to come, they can kind of see what we've prepared, kind of the plan that we have laid out, and just see what public comments we get, and then if we need to, we can amend this report if needed, depending on the comments we get, but, so, yeah, that would be the next step, that hopefully in the next month, I would say, try to get that scheduled and get that, have that meeting.
Who was all in attendance to the meetings with the business owners?
We reached out to about a dozen, we got, I think, 4 that either attended the meeting or we also sent out a survey to all of them. So they either responded to the survey or attended. So we talked to Amhoff Trucking and we talked to Wilco, and then the school district and the co-op responded to our survey. And then another business owner along the corridor.
But was it just members of Shive, or was there anybody from the city in attendance to these, to listen to the feedback?
I attended one of the meetings, but no one showed up at the meeting that I attended.
We had them they were at City Hall. 'Cause the meeting were held.
I agree with Frank that this is a lot here, so I appreciate that. I read it twice over the weekend and I still don't think I comprehended it all. So I commend you for that. I do wish that we would have had this before we made the decision on Fourth Avenue. It would have been nice to have this instead of just flying by the seat of our pants instead of looking at this. So I wish that we could have had that for that discussion.
Zach, with this, when it talks about the different intersection studies there, I noticed this under the scenario column, it talks about 24, but then it jumps out to 27, and then it jumps out to 47. Is there a reason you didn't?
So I think
include,
27 was kind of the estimated build out of more of Ivy Acres, and then, well, Wilco's kind of already built out, but that was kind of taking into account where an estimate of when we thought Ivy Acres would be pretty well built out. That's what that 2027 year is for, and then you look 20 years in the future from that. So that's why it's 2027.
I was just trying to figure out why there was a
2047.
37 in
Yeah.
there, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you found somewhat surprising since our last go around the discussions here regarding roundabouts and with this study now, anything that stood out?
I don't know about surprising. I guess I thought when talking to a lot of the business owners, I guess that it wasn't even related to Leclerc Road. It kept coming up that they don't like the boulevards on 4th and 6th Avenue. I don't know how that kept coming up in the conversations, but no, as far as roundabout specifically, no, not really. I think it's just, they're useful in situations, but I think it just, takes a bit, I guess, for people to get used to them. I don't know.
When you were here back in July, we spent quite a bit of time talking about roundabouts, and that kind of dominated the conversation. And then as I read through this, there's not much in there about roundabouts. Did you just kind of change your mind on that?
The data's in there, but I guess, we knew that that 4th Avenue intersection had been voted to be a signal already, so we have that in there as a signal. And then it kind of changed some of the other things, like if we're putting a signal at 4th, right now, like in the report, you'll see we're recommending to not really do any improvements at 6th Avenue right now. It didn't meet any signal warrants. And I think your best bet with now that you are putting a signal at 4th is kind of see how that intersection starts to perform. But also just with the close proximity of those two intersections, pretty close, you wouldn't want a roundabout there with putting a signal at 4th. So really that would kind of go away. And then as far as the off-ramp, I think just in talking more with Amhoff, they said they get 50 to 100 trucks a day that come through there. I think it's just the off-ramp isn't probably the most realistic spot for roundabout at that point.
On that, eventually out there by, where the pavement turns into blacktop that goes out past Bish's and all that and past the, anhydrous of the River Valley all the way down to Scott County Park Road there. Would that be where they mill it and put it back down, kind of like what was being talked about for possible South First Street when they do that? Or is that gonna be milled and hauled away and?
Yeah, that's something we would have to probably talk about and take a closer look. I'm not exactly sure what that pavement section along there, if it's just like chip seal that's been overlaid in the past or what, but yeah, some type of maintenance thing like that where that's kind of shown as the phase 3, but that doesn't mean you couldn't, do that in one of your future year street projects in a year or two or whatnot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Brian, you have any more questions for that?
No, and I may have missed it, but I guess the only comment I would have is, I think for the public meeting. I would like to be aware of that and be able to participate in it. I think it would have been nice to be part of the meeting with the businesses as well, just to kind of gauge their, not just their feedback, but you can visually see some of their responses and their reactions to the ideas. I think would be helpful since we are the ones ultimately voting on it. I know not everybody can be there, and we obviously have to trust for you to bring back that information, but I would be interested in attending if it worked out.
Absolutely, yep. Yeah, and really the business owner meetings was to kind of just get existing conditions, kind of how they use the corridor for their business.
Sure.
We didn't really present any of the concepts or anything to them. It was, we just brought I just had the blank kind of overview area of the whole corridor, and was just trying to get input from them about how they use the corridor, what kind of traffic do they see, you know, what issues do you see now? And that was kind of the feedback that we were trying to gather there. We didn't want to really lead them down one way or another. Sure, kind of wanted to see what, how they see it today, really.
But for the public one, that would be actually laying out these ideas and plans and letting them give feedback on it.
Yep.
Okay, so a little bit different
Yes.
scenarios.
Yep, exactly.
Brian, Adrian, Scott, have any more questions for Zach? Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Number 3B, discussion on purchasing policy and spending authorization. Nevada, I'm calling you for that.
So just bringing this document, we talked about it back in early August. Wanted to give the council some more time to review the terms in there and some of the limits and get some input from council and mayor on where those limits would best be set for the city of Eldridge, so that we can have a little clearer policy and definition on what needs to come on an agenda for approval and what can be taken care of at the operational level and then come for approval on the bills payable list rather than as an agenda item. So we're seeing budgeted items that are specifically approved in the budget and then not sure whether or not they need to come back in front of council as an agenda item again because of the amount. So we need, some clarification on that, and maintenance items that would be covered under our normal maintenance and operating budget. Do those items at a certain point need to come forward for approval before our department heads can proceed with those purchases and those maintenance items? So that's where we're really looking at getting some of that definition. And in the draft, some of the limits are already set based on the threshold set by the Iowa DOT. So that's where some of those initial numbers come in with your vertical and horizontal infrastructure and what where those approval levels come in. Those amounts are pulled from the thresholds that are on the Iowa DOT website, and those get looked at every 2 years, I believe. So those would get updated, and we would just have a provision in there that states that whatever that threshold is should be failed to update it on time, that we would be following the DOT thresholds. And then the other thresholds that are in here are just trying to kind of determine at what point they need city administrator sign off, but can just go through bills payable, and then at what point they need to come forward to the council as an official agenda item for approval. Specifically looking at things like those budgeted items, change orders. When do change orders on a contract need to come forward for specific approval, or when can they be signed off on a pay app and then come through on the pay app when they get council approval that way? The sealed bid and quotation procedures and recommendations in this policy are pretty standard across the board. The limits and some of those, again, are set by state code or thresholds set by the DOT for those types of projects. Along with the purchasing policy, setting what that credit card limit should be for staff, as they're going to be using credit cards for purchases or travel and training. What should that initial limit be for those employees when they come on? Right now, we kind of have a range that, as they're set up, set by the department head or the departmental needs or what their typical purchases are so that they don't get stuck out of town somewhere and unable to pay for something that they need. So getting a consistent limit on that and a training and travel approval process where they bring forward that request before they go and travel and do that training, and then having it come back through with that credit card reconciliation and approval process. We do have recommendation from the auditors as well on setting purchasing and approval authorization policy as part of our the citations that we've had over the past few years. That is one recommendation that they have for internal control. So putting a policy like this in place will help with that, with our audit findings as well.
Well, I'll call you in a minute, Brian.
Oh, I'm just sitting here with my hands.
I know. Looking at the initial numbers that were presented here, like when we get to our next meeting, there's a thing for the council to approve with Engelbrecht to do some stabilization out at Shattered Meadows not to exceed $5,000. So as we get in the fall, sooner or later, November rains start coming even when there's been a droughty in the summer and early fall. So if we would have something like this approved, that could be approved and not have a 2-week delay and possibly run into rainy weather. So that's just an example where I think that's in a reasonable amount that will cover quite a few small projects from time to time that would speed things up and allow the department heads and administrator to work with each other. And we all get notified by email anyway when they do something, but it would just, sometimes weather or supply chain creates a problem. And when it's that amount, I feel that would help speed things up. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, there's things I like in here and there's things I don't like in here. For instance, the threshold, I think 25,000 for anybody to have the right to do without council approval is way too much. I think at the top end for the city administrator, the top end max should be 10,000. I think the 5,000 should only be up to public works director, utility manager, and maybe wastewater treatment plant, which those are utility boards on that side. They would have to agree to the same program. I disagree with capital improvement plan, just spending because it's in the budget. If our funds run short because of some action, it could be a storm, it could be anything, just because it's in the CIP, I don't think that's the authority to spend money on it. Council should have the last look at that before they pull the trigger on to do something or not. Change orders up to 15% of the thing. If we have a $2 million project, you're talking up to $300,000. Do you want anybody in the city approving that without council approval? I don't.
No.
These numbers add up. Yeah, they're DOT numbers on some of the threshold. DOT's a hell of a lot better financial shape than the city. City's in good, but DOT can cover it over a big area. They have offices and offices of accountants to track this. How are we as council members going to track this? At the end of the day, we're responsible for every penny spent. Now, in the past practice, if it was budgeted through the budget process, some specific line item for a project or for an issue, it's like, yeah, it's in the budget. But to me, if it's not specifically a line item, it needs council approval. Credit card set limits on. I've been harping about that for a while. What did we find out? Card could have $3,000 on it, and somebody charges over that, the credit card pushes it through anyways. That's another problem. We should have tiered levels on that. We should have, a little more specific, so many charges per month or per day or something. But we really, past history, we got to dial all that in. And this would be a good vehicle to do that. But there, like I said, there's things in here I like and there's things in here I don't like. Spending limits, there's 2 different thresholds because of what it's on. I think those should be the same. You know, I think department heads $5,000, city administrator $10,000. The thing with Engelbrecht's, I understand the timing of that. I think we're all for that. However, there's $5,000 that no one's given approval. So that's one. And what if you have 20 of those over the course of a year? It's $100,000 that we haven't planned in our budget.
For clarification on your capital improvement, you mentioned that 10%. And when I first looked at that, I thought the same thing, because we've got some high dollar projects and that 10% could be excessive, but I read it again and it said that the other approval levels based on the dollar threshold still apply. So doesn't that still revert back to what individual department heads and city administrator can approve according to this?
I take that specific paragraph. I interpret it in a way as if we budget, prime example, asphalt overlay on Buttermilk Road, and we budget $2 million. You know, in our CIP. If it comes in less than 2.2 million, they can spend it without our approval.
So this says for the change orders, an aggregate amount of 15,000, unless it increased the cost of the project by more than 10,000, which would be for smaller projects, then that would be under the 15,000, then they would cap it at 10% instead of 15,000, I believe is the interpretation it was meant to.
I'm referring to the paragraph above that says change capital improvement plan. It's right above the change order one. It's on page 5.
But the last sentence in there, it says other approval levels based on the dollar threshold still apply. So I go back to the approval level.
The 15,000
And
for
that-
change orders.
Still sets a lower threshold. It
But
still
if it's
control
been
that.
approved in the CIP, that doesn't necessarily mean the council and at the end of the day is going to do that CIP. It depends on our funding stream.
But there's still clarification in governance via the city administrator to proceed with that limited amount if it's warranted, is what I see to me as well.
I'm not reading that specific paragraph that way.
Is there clarification? We don't have that clarification tonight, obviously, so this is brought up and it's possibly a different interpretation of that, but maybe as we move forward, unless we do have interpretation for that way everybody's on the same page.
I guess
But
the clarification for,
I mean, if it's on the CIP plan, if the council is approved to do that project on the CIP, not just being on the CIP, there's a vote to do it, then that's a little different.
already approved in the annual capital improvement plan, so it's not your full capital improvement plan in any project, it's what's actually approved for the capital improvement plan in the budget that year, and it's got a budget set, and most of those capital improvement plans are gonna have a contract process where you have to put your plans together because of the size of the project, so they're gonna be in front of council several times. So this particular paragraph isn't meant to just open capital improvement projects. It's still within the approved budget on an annual basis for something that's been specifically improved in that fiscal year for a project and has a budget set to it already, either by plans and bids that have been put together by the engineer or a set budget for a project that's being done on a smaller scale, like maybe a lighting upgrade, and we've got a budget of 60,000 and something comes in. That one's not necessarily gonna be out to bid and have plans, but we're gonna have that budgeted project for that specific capital improvement plan. And then that's where that 10% or that 15,000 on a major project that would come in, which, 15,000 can certainly be lower, but that's what those thresholds are just meant to mean where those change orders can come through on the pay app, or where we have to stop a project, get it on an agenda, go for an approval before the contractor can continue on that project because of the change order. Does that help
It
at all?
does. And the CIP is a line item, right?
Yeah, so
Already
with your
different
CIP,
issues.
when you
It's not the
develop
whole
that,
thing, it's just one of the line items on there.
yeah, so you'd approve a 3 to 5 or sometimes longer CIP plan, but then each year as you go to the budget, you'll look at the projects slated for that year, and you'll either put them in the budget with that budget amount specifically for that project or not, just depending on whether or not you have the funds in that fiscal year to actually do it when that comes around.
Right.
So it would, yes, be specifically named in the budget and passed with that fiscal year's budget.
But it's still, that 10%, it still resorts back to that approval level.
Right,
Correct.
So-
yes.
That's how I read it.
So the possibility of a $100,000 change order is not possible because it's,
Because it's
well exceeds that
$15,000 or greater.
$15,000.
It's capped
Right.
from that standpoint.
You're just, more importantly, you don't like that dollar amount of what that approval level is. So if that dollar amount was changed or reduced, and the other thing you were mentioning is the different approval levels, right?
My point is, just because it's on the CIP doesn't mean we're gonna do it. Regardless of what level it is, if it's, I think this after 60, it's gotta go out to bid. What if it's 55 for 2.2 million? I mean, I don't know how many of you guys were here when we went through LeClaire Road and First Street. We got into a situation there where we got 4 or 5 change orders one night for the council to approve. It's already been done. Council had no input on if we wanted to do them or not wanted to do it. Now, our city engineers signed off on them. You know, they felt it was relevant.
Because of what they found underneath, correct?
Right.
It wasn't anything they knew about until they dug in.
Right.
You're right, it
I
does
remember
happen.
those. Right. It can happen.
Yeah.
Did you have a suggestion of, what language you would be comfortable with?
The CIP, if it was previously approved and funded by council, would be one way to handle that burden.
So in the budget, it's
Already in
funded.
the budget, right?
Yeah, if it was
A budgeted line item.
budgeted line item.
That's how I'm.
Isn't that what it says?
I can change the verbiage to be a little more clear on that.
It says already approved in the annual CIP budget.
Yeah, the annual is meant to capture that, the fiscal year budget,
Gotcha.
rather than your 3 to 5, 10-year that just annual CIP.
I gotcha.
So it would be specifically in your budget and approved already, but I can change that to capital improvement plan projects that have been approved in the current fiscal year budget or something along those lines.
And then I had a question about the department heads. When they were spending the 5,000, they didn't have to go through you for that 5,000 is what you're saying, correct? And then how many different things can they do in a month that are 5,000? Is there a cap on that?
I don't think there's a cap. I think 5,000 could definitely come down for department head level. Again, this is just a template. I was looking for a little bit of guidance from you guys on that, but this would be more, anything that was out of the ordinary, even at those threshold levels, would still likely need to come in front of city council just for sake of transparency and having that conversation about those items. So these would be more what you're looking for that fall into maintenance, routine maintenance and operations, things that are budgeted in a broad and general budget line of maintenance is 50,000 for the year for a certain department. They can proceed with those maintenance purchases and items if they're 5,000 and under, but it's not meant to just be an open book to purchase anything for 5,000 and under without approval. But I could certainly agree that that could be lower for the department heads as well. But it's meant just to help guide the already budgeted expenditures that council is generally aware of, their general operating, and travel and training and those types of things. Which again, they still come through bills payable, so you'll still see every expense come through, and if we start to see expenses come through on bills payable and aren't comfortable with what that looks like after these thresholds are put in place, then we can, this is not an ordinance that will take 2 months to get updated. We can just come back and amend the policy until we're at a point that everybody's comfortable and we're seeing those expenses come through with no surprises. And it can be updated and amended as we go through it, but it just helps to give a little more efficient operations on a day-to-day without wondering if this does or does not have to go in front of council for specific approval or not. It's still going to come through on your bills payable, and it's still going to be analyzed for each expense as to whether or not that is a routine or budgeted or normal expenditure that council would generally be aware of.
So this will just streamline some projects, if something comes up, that
Yes.
they'll be able to take care of it, instead of waiting 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever the case may be.
Yep, this just helps with when we have
I'm okay with
repair
it.
items come in that have a higher dollar amount that is kind of in that area where you're just not quite sure.
Right.
We have to get approval for this, or can we go ahead, because it'd be nice to keep this project going.
I'm okay with trusting the department heads to do that. I would like to suggest, Brian, since you are passionate about this, obviously, I would like to see what your changes are in writing. I'd like to see everything that you are recommending so that we can then compare and do it that way, because obviously you're the one that's done the most research, and rightfully so because you've had the experience. So I would
I've
prefer,
been drugged through the mud the most.
well, that's another way to put it, but I think that it would be beneficial to everybody if we can see that in writing, so then we can compare.
The first thing I'd do is do away with that range from 5,000 to 2499. I'd make that from 5,000 to 10,000. Anything over 10,000 has to go by council.
I'm not saying I disagree, I'm a visual person, and I'd rather see it in writing and so I
Study
can.
it before.
Yep.
And I would put in there normal day-to-day functions of the city.
Well, you got some homework now, as if you had nothing else to do.
So
See which stretches over.
some of the goal of this too is to break it down into what would be considered public improvements. That's why you're seeing those higher dollar amounts and those first thresholds, because those have different governing rules to them already outside of our local governance. And then you get down to your other purchases, which are your local goods and purchases that you're seeing just come through on normal projects and normal day-to-day expenditures. And then you see it get down to less than 10, or under 10,000 at city administrator approval, under 5,000 at department head approval, where you get requests for quotations or sealed bids or proposals. Those are going to be more of your day-to-day operational expenses at our local level that doesn't have any governance above and beyond what's here at the city, where these other ones are going to have some rules and laws, either by Iowa code, Iowa DOT, federal, different levels of regulations that are going to govern that process.
To save on the confusion, I think the thresholds need to be the same for both. Instead of saying, well, it's for this, so you can go to this amount, or it's this, so you can go to this amount. And we should have something in here a little different for professional services, because those amounts don't have to go out for bid.
So do we want goods and services broken out? Or you're gonna give us that in writing? I guess I have goods and service purchases
Well, that's what Scott
of goods and
recommended. I
services.
didn't agree to it yet.
I asked politely, Brian.
My job is to go through policy and give you my opinion.
Okay,
I can separate them out. I have goods and services together for purchases and contracts and what we would need quotes for, what we would need sealed quotes for. But I can break those out into two different processes.
But if the values are the same, you could use both.
So like have it all in one chart if all the values are the same.
Yeah, this is the maximum somebody can do, period.
Would create less confusion.
I mean, currently we have great employees. You know, we've said that before, I don't have it, but we do have to build in a check and balance. You know, do we require two authorizations, department head and city administrator signing off?
And that was one thing that I was thinking too, Brian, because, you know, they won't be here at the night that we'd be authorizing those funds. And if she was signed off on it, she would know exactly what it was for. We could just ask her and move forward without wasting any more time or not approving that bill. So that was my thought too. Just have her initial off on it, that she knew about it, that she approved, that they talked about it. I'm good with that.
And that's what we do now on the other bills.
That's currently, I mean, the department heads code their invoices for all of their purchases, all of their invoices, and then I code admin, currently code the electric utility, and then they come in front of you guys. And so when I run those bills payable and prepare that for the packet, then I see all of those invoices and prepare them for you guys. But the department heads are all signing off on those with their own approvals and coding them themselves already, and then bringing them forward in the bills payable process.
I'm just saying if there's something to get the city through a problem one day and it's $4,000, and I'll just pick a department, sewer plant. Somebody wants to spend $4,000 on something. That's fine if you sign off on it too.
So we can help streamline everything.
Well, we know who to hold accountable if something goes sideways.
And that's still kind of a checks and balances, because now you have two people agreeing to that amount.
And are you saying that after a lower threshold? Let's say we reduce department heads from 5,000 to 2,500. So up to 2,500, they're good, but 2,500 to 5,000, then it has a signature? Or are you talking all across the board?
Well, 2,500 should catch most of us as motor, but if not, the city administrator's got a higher threshold. Now, I don't want to have the aggregate of the two individuals' thresholds on something. You know, I don't want to say, well, I've got 2,500, you got 5,000, so we can buy this $6,000 thing. No, I mean, we just gotta have a check and balance in the system. And then we'll have to figure out, what do we do with the assistant city administrator? The administrator's gone, he's gotta have authority also.
That could be worded in case of absence of the administrator, some wordage like that added to
Yeah.
the changes, so that means the same things apply for Jeff if she'd be on training or vacation or something like that.
Yeah, because you got,
In
She's
your
the
absence.
acting city
Yeah.
administrator in my absence.
Yeah, city code says I'm her, she's gone, so. Right?
Pretty much.
I'm not saying that.
it'd be just nice to spell it
I'm
out.
not saying.
I wouldn't spell that.
You've done this before, haven't you? You've done this before,
Well, I just have something simple procedurally wise. And it talks about it on the credit card. Is there a policy, I didn't see it anywhere, that somebody has to print their name or their city ID or something when they sign stuff? Because I know some people's signatures can be not legible.
For,
Anything that, if they're buying something, purchasing something, signing for something, rather than just a signature that sometimes you may or may not be able to read, adding that they either print it or they have their employee number next to it?
We don't have anything like that currently. Their cards are all identified by their name, so the purchase is gonna be on there, but whether it's their signature or not,
We do have some charge accounts, like at certain businesses where they just sign a piece of paper though. But I can't think specifically if they're identified by name on those receipts or not.
some of them, their names are printed in addition to their signature.
Yeah,
Like
The
merchants do,
invoice,
they put
yeah.
it right at the bottom.
I don't think we have something across the board or for their individual credit card receipts right now, but we can.
I like the idea. I don't have a third of the employees that the city does, and I still have to ask questions sometimes if people don't print their name because I can't read it. And some of them are so far off that I can't even get close.
For credit cards particularly, they have their own individual cards with their names, so the statement comes in and I reconcile and ask them specifically for their receipts from there. So we don't have as much issue there, but on invoices, potentially, we would see that more.
yeah, or I don't know how Menards does it. Do we have a charge account there? Do they just have to use their charge
Menards
card?
invoices us and they usually have a signature, and I can't remember if theirs has a printed name or not also, but
I think they said Merchants does.
Yeah,
They include the name,
Merchants
but-
does include
So
it.
Menards, but I don't know if there's any other places like Menards that we might have a charge account at that maybe wouldn't have the name on it. But we could rectify that by just asking the business to.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
like, we have a
put the
policy that
employees'
you,
names on there.
anytime that something's delivered, some goods are received, you have to have your name printed. That way you have no question who it is.
Yep, we can put something like that.
It's Monday. So much for the burn ban.
Well, I think this, you got a question?
I think it's, we're approaching here and we still got items to cover, but I mean, to Ryan's point there, and the talk with Jeff, if it hasn't been improved, or if it's that little small window on there, is there like a PO? Or the purchase orders that have to get signed by the person that approves, that could double check that, or no?
We haven't had any issues with identifying them now because we've got a smaller number of employees and it's the same ones going to the same vendors, because for each department, they use kind of the same vendors. But we do have a PO system in our current software that we just don't use. So my hope is to get that implemented when the timing's right, once we're in the middle of switching over to our cloud-based software, and then we'll be upgrading to ERP 10, which is a new platform in our software. So once we get through some of that, I'd like to see us utilizing that system. We pay for it. It's a very, very good system, and I'd like to see us using it to its full potential in time. So we would get to that point where we would use that PO process and have internal sign off and requisitions and approvals internally within our system that we can track, but we don't currently use it.
But I don't know, Ryan, that might address that, or maybe you're looking at a different aspect, but.
Most stores, if you go in and they ask for, do you have a PO? No, just use my name. That's
That's what you see.
that's a reality.
I just know how times change, and we may have the same set of employees now, in 2 years that might be different. If everybody gets in the habit of identifying themselves on anything that's purchased or received, then fixes the problem, or narrows it down.
I think along with credit cards, we as a city have to determine if it warrants for every employee to have them. I don't think it does.
Then we get back to a different policy for travel and training reimbursement or reimbursements on purchases, which either way is fine if we want to do that instead of credit cards. But under the auditor's recommendation, it was to use one of those two policies because we currently use both. And I think when we talked about that last time we brought this up, we had a consensus on the credit cards because they're identified by individual and we get those statements.
I'm still okay with that.
But we are, I mean, that can certainly be changed to doing a reimbursement type policy instead.
It can also be, we can have, similar to what we used to, have a couple credit cards at City Hall, they check them out when they go on travel, they bring the credit card and the receipts back and still do it with credit cards.
And we don't have we can do that too. If we don't have the tracking as clear on the statements at that, because we just have a couple of department credit cards that aren't tied to a name, so if someone takes it and we don't get it back or we're missing a receipt, it could be a little harder to track down that receipt. We try and sign them in and out. I know they did do that in the past, but it takes away some of that identification that we have on the statements right now for each person's name. But
I think you misunderstood or I didn't present it well enough. I'm not talking about taking everybody's credit card away. The ones that we warrant, people that need them, keep them. But the people that really don't need a credit card unless they're traveling, going to class or something, have a credit card up at City Hall, sign it to them, they sign the paper, they checked it out, they bring it back with the receipts. It's too easy to spend somebody else's money. Just an option.
Scott, do you have anything else?
Nope, good.
Well, I think this is more than a great start on this, so let administration make some changes. Brian, if you have anything else, and we'll come back and look at this again. Anything else, anybody?
Can you send this to me in a Word document so I can make my corrections right on it? If I so inclined to do.
We'd rather have that done by tomorrow evening.
Yeah, just wait for it in your inbox.
All right, we'll move on to 3C. Jeff, I see you're here too, Ray. Can I call either one of you about the soil quality restoration program and the remaining funds? Jeff, me and you talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think Nevada is the actual numbers, yep.
Yep. So the soil quality restoration, that's the reimbursement program that we currently have for residents can apply, have some restoration work done on their yard, and then we'll reimburse them for 50% once that's paid if it's a qualifying process. Right now, we currently have about 22,000 left. We've got about 9,000 of that in pending applications. So remaining unused or unallocated, we've got about 13,346. We've had 21 applications since June of 2024, one of which was denied. 10 of those are pending and 10 are paid. We've had 100 total since the start of this program with 90 of those paid. So I did ask the DNR whether or not we would be able to use those on city property and parks. We can. They had the same recommendation, I think, that Ryan brought up, that we would want to give a sunset to the residents that are interested in using it before we would use it on any city property. So I just wanted to give you those stats of where we're at right now and get your feedback on whether you want to continue to leave that open for the residents to use that remaining 13, or if you want to sunset that. And
Why don't we consider, I hope the residents use it. I've used it and the difference it made in my yard was tremendous. I had no idea. I mean, I waited for a long time to even pull the trigger. I felt guilty about using that program, being on council. I thought, well, might as well do it. I think we should put some messages out for residents to take advantage of it, but we also need a sunset of that. Whether it's August 1st, August 31 of 2025, something. I mean, we don't want to just keep carrying this on forever.
I'm not certain how well it's been advertised. When we first started it, yes, it's been out there, but you see all of the growth that's off of First Street in Townsend and what's transpiring in Dale's area. There's a lot of new development, and I'm sure those individuals aren't aware of it until they come in, until they receive a packet, or speak to city staff, or if they're working with Ray or somebody, that information is not there. They don't know all this, so you need to allow them time to get oriented with this program and with those remaining funds. Once that gets out there and we communicate properly to them, and then re-communicate to the general community, I feel we won't have much problem spending these funds for residential usage. Just get along with all the new growth that we have going, and stripping the topsoil. I'm sure people is gonna want that put back. So,
You can do another social media push and put it out on the website and advertise it a little heavier here.
okay, thank you.
I would be in favor of like a late spring deadline that you market it and pick that month, whether it's May 1st or May 31st. And if you're signed up, you don't have to have it done yet, but you have to have it committed. And then after that, that would close the applications. Something, I mean, at that point, we could wrap it up in 2025.
Is there a rush or is there a deadline to use these funds?
There's not, but we can't close that loan out, that SRF loan that is funding these until we expend those all. So we would like to see it done within this next
And that
year.
would make it a 3-year time frame then from start to finish?
Yeah.
Roughly, so I mean, that's plenty of time, I would say, with marketing.
We'll do another advertisement, push it on social media, and then I can bring those back to you early next year and see where we're at with funding
And
at that
with
point.
$9,000, you're talking maybe 18 to 20 more applications that are approved, so it's not a lot.
And marketing funds can't be taken out of this, correct? It's just the restoration program itself.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, mine, on my personal property, you can see in the bills is $260. Is what's being refunded to me.
Yeah, mine was 600 or 700.
It'll be recovered.
You don't, but, yeah. It make a difference.
When you put that pool in, yours would be lower.
Anybody else have any questions on the soil restoration?
No, sir.
All right, we'll move on to Ford.
Frank, one comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
We got residents here for a 7 o'clock meeting, and I think Ray has a lot here, so I think.
Actually, I could probably be through in 5 minutes.
All right.
All right? Okay, put your tray tables up and set your seat in the upright position.
You're ready to take.
Currently, Eldridge, Scott County, Davenport, and Bettendorf on the 2015 building code cycle for our construction requirements. We're updating to the 2021 code series. This is for the building code, the residential code, the fire code, and the swimming pool and spa codes only. The state is still on the 2015 code. They're still in a bit of flux and they are not updating, which begs the question, then why are we? Davenport and Bettendorf are part of a program through FEMA called the Community Rating System, where their constituents that live in a floodplain can get discounts on their flood insurance. In order to be a part of that program, their building codes are supposed to be within 6 years of the cycle that they're on. Currently, since we're on the 2015, they're 9 years out of cycle, so they're getting some pushback. So Davenport and Bettendorf decided to update to the 2021 codes. I spoke with Greg Schopfeld, who's with Scott County now, and we decided to update with them. We're expecting very few changes. In fact, I'm going to mention 2. We have met with architects, contractors, engineers. We've had 3 public hearings with the other jurisdictions. I'm the legislative committee chairman for the Quad City Builders and Remodelers, so of course I've let them know what's going on. And I'm in good contact with JP at the Associated General Contractors. All of these organizations are supporting this change. The 2 changes The first one comes out of Bettendorf. When they have a building that they're going to put townhouses in, if they're going to put 5 or more homes in one building, then those would have to have a sprinkler system. It's only required to have the easiest sprinkler system under the NFPA. And so it's a bit of a cost burden to go more than 4 units in a townhouse. Currently, we have a lot of townhouses being built in Eldridge. None of them are more than 4 units. And so, and we've got a couple of applications coming in where more townhouses will be built in other areas. None of those are more than 4 units. So we don't see this as being a big issue for us. The other change is in the fire code. I've worked closely with the police chief, Keith Sneckloff, with this. Been in contact with Jim Morris, who is the Davenport Fire Marshal, and Jeremy Peterson, who's head of community development for Bettendorf, and they are moving in this direction. The fire code allows the fire code official, which is me, to allow more than 30 homes in an area with only one way in and one way out, period. There's no criteria. I'm just given the authority to do it. We've had a couple of subdivisions that have asked to have that, and in one case, Keith and I discussed it and we granted it. We now feel that that may have been not the way to go with that one. That subdivision also doesn't look like it's going to get built, so it may not become an issue. We have another one that is asked, and because this subdivision has a preliminary plat that shows phase 2, we'll create a secondary entrance for our fire department apparatus to get into. We would like to be able to up that to a limit of 60 homes. When I started looking at this, I contacted Davenport and Bettendorf. They both recognize that they have not been paying attention to this. It is in a part of the code that the state of Iowa did not adopt, so it's not part of the state code. But we feel like we want to make sure that we don't end up with 100 or 200 houses in an area that only has one way in, one way out. But by the same token, we'd like to provide a little leeway because we've got some land in Eldridge that when it gets developed, may have to go through 80 acres to get to that secondary entrance on the other side. And we want to allow for an orderly development, the same way Davenport and Bettendorf do. So, like I say, I've kind of been through the ringer and talked to everyone. We're all in agreement that this is a pretty good way to go. Jim Morris from Davenport literally said, this is a section of code that everybody does differently. The way you're doing it, he said, honestly, I might look at it because that sounds like a pretty good way to go to me. So those are the 2 changes for the codes. We would be looking at a first reading in 2 weeks from tonight, second and third reading in the subsequent meetings. Effective date for enforcement would be January 1st. And I would just say, if you have anyone asking you questions about the code updates, please have them get in touch with me. I'll do everything I can to get them the best available information. Are there any further questions for me?
Right, will that change Ivory Acres? Because when they platted that, we put the restriction in, they had to have another access for fire department.
It will. They've got 77 lots platted now. They would be allowed to go to 60 certificate of occupancies instead of 30 before they have to have that secondary entrance in.
When would be the first public hearing scheduled for?
2 weeks from tonight. Okay?
Thanks, Jeff.
All right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Ray.
I make a motion for adjournment of the committee, the whole meeting.
Second.
Motion back, second by Blackwell to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays, I have it. Adjourned at 7:09. We're gonna take just a couple minute break.